He was born on a tiny island, mocked for his weird accent, yet he conquered the entire Western world. Forget boring history textbooks. This is the unbelievable story of a poor bully victim who made emperors tremble in fear. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte, a fierce Corsican boy who grew up resenting France before he ruled over it. At military school in France, rich kids laughed at his worn clothes and strange pronunciation every single day. Instead of crying, he hid in the library, devouring history books and mastering mathematics with ruthless, unbroken focus. He realized early that power does not care about your birthright. It only respects speed, intellect, and sheer willpower. When the French Revolution exploded in blood and chaos, the old aristocrats fled, leaving the door wide open. Young Napoleon was just a nobody artillery officer, but he saw chaos as the ultimate ladder to absolute power. At the siege of Toulon, British warships controlled the harbour, and French generals had no idea what to do. Napoleon pointed his cannons at the heights, smashed the enemy defences, and forced the mighty British fleet to run. Overnight, the 24-year-old nobody was promoted to brigadier general, catching the eye of powerful leaders in Paris. Soon after, an angry mob of royalists marched through Paris, threatening to destroy the fragile revolutionary government forever. Napoleon did not hesitate or panic. He loaded his cannons with grapeshot and fired directly into the advancing crowd. That ruthless decision saved the French government in minutes, earning him instant fame and command of the Italian army. Around this time, he fell madly in love with Josephine, an older, glamorous woman who captured his wild heart. 2 days after their wedding, he rushed to Italy to lead an army that was starving, broke, and demoralized. His soldiers had no shoes and no hope, but Napoleon stepped in front of them and ignited their fire. He promised them honor, glory, and the richest lands in Europe if they followed him into absolute hell. Instead of fighting standard slow battles, he moved his troops at lightning speed, catching enemy generals completely by surprise. He divided larger enemy armies into smaller pieces, crushing each one individually before they could ever join forces together. At the bridge of Arcole, he grabbed a flag and charged through enemy fire himself, inspiring his terrified men. In just 1 year, his ragtag army humiliated the Austrian Empire and conquered northern Italy without losing once. Paris was stunned by his victories. People began worshipping him, not just as a general, but as a savior. Knowing Britain was France's greatest enemy, he sailed across the Mediterranean Sea to invade Egypt and disrupt British trade. Standing before the ancient pyramids of Giza, he told his troops that 40 centuries of history were watching them. He crushed the Egyptian cavalry at the Battle of the Pyramids, using giant, unbreakable infantry squares that shot everywhere. During this campaign, his soldiers discovered the mysterious Rosetta Stone, unlocking the secrets of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics for mankind. However, the British Navy destroyed his fleet at sea, trapping Napoleon and his entire army in the burning desert. Hearing that the French government was collapsing back home, he secretly boarded a ship and escaped back to Paris. The people of France welcomed him like a hero, desperate for a strong leader who could restore real order. In November 1799, he launched a bold coup d'état, overthrowing the corrupt government with his loyal soldiers. At just 30 years old, the poor island boy became first consul, the most powerful man in all France. He did not just wage war, he rebuilt the entire nation from scratch, with astonishing sleepless energy and focus. He created the Napoleonic Code, a revolutionary legal system that guaranteed equality under the law and still exists today. He built roads, founded the Bank of France, and fixed the broken economy, so ordinary citizens could finally prosper. He also introduced meritocracy, meaning anyone could rise to the highest ranks through talent, rather than rich family blood. Yet his hunger for ultimate power was endless. He decided that being first consul was simply not enough anymore. In 1804, inside Notre Dame Cathedral, he staged the most arrogant coronation ceremony in all human history. As the Pope stood ready to crown him, Napoleon grabbed the crown himself and placed it on his head. That single shocking gesture told the entire world that nobody gave him power, he conquered it with his hands. Now Emperor of France, he faced a massive coalition of European monarchies, terrified that his revolution would spread everywhere. Britain, Russia, and Austria united their armies, vowing to crush this upstart emperor and restore the old royal families. Napoleon knew he had to strike fast, before the enemy nations could combine their forces into one unstoppable beast. He marched his grand army across Europe with incredible speed, covering dozens of miles a day in total secrecy. In 1805, he faced the combined Russian and Austrian armies at Austerlitz, his absolute greatest military masterpiece. He deliberately made his right flank look weak, tricking the enemy emperors into attacking right where he wanted them. When the enemy rushed into the trap, Napoleon launched a surprise counterattack through the freezing fog, destroying their center. Thousands of retreating Russian soldiers drowned in icy lakes as French cannons smashed the frozen surfaces beneath their feet. Austerlitz destroyed the Holy Roman Empire forever and made Napoleon the undisputed master of mainland Europe in one afternoon. Next, he crushed the proud Prussian army at Jena and marched triumphantly through the historic streets of Berlin. No army on earth could stand against his artillery tactics, rapid marching speed, and brilliant, unpredictable battlefield traps. Even Beethoven originally dedicated a symphony to him before tearing the title page in disgust when Napoleon became emperor. By 1807, Napoleon controlled almost the entire European continent, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Russian border. But one enemy remained safely out of reach across the sea: the unstoppable naval empire of Great Britain. Since he could not cross the water to invade England, he decided to strangle their economy with financial warfare. He launched the continental system, banning every European nation under his control from trading with British merchants or ships. This economic blockade sounded brilliant on paper, but it eventually became the fatal obsession that destroyed his entire empire. When Portugal refused to stop trading with Britain, Napoleon sent his troops through Spain to punish the rebellious country. He then made a terrible mistake by removing the Spanish king and putting his own brother on Spain's throne. The Spanish people exploded in rage, launching a vicious, bloody guerrilla war that dragged on for 6 brutal years. Instead of fighting in open fields, Spanish rebels ambushed French patrols in mountains, bleeding Napoleon's army day by day. He later called this Spanish war his Spanish ulcer, a non-stop drain on his soldiers' money and military reputation. Meanwhile, he divorced his beloved Josephine because she could not give him an heir to inherit his vast throne. He married an Austrian princess named Marie-Louise, who finally gave birth to a son, securing the Bonaparte dynasty. At this moment, Napoleon was at the absolute peak of human power, commanding kingdoms and rewriting laws at will. But pride makes men blind. When Tsar Alexander of Russia broke his trade rules, Napoleon vowed severe, crushing revenge. In 1812, he gathered the largest invasion force Europe had ever seen, 600,000 soldiers marching east. He expected a quick, decisive battle, but the Russians used a brilliant strategy. They refused to stand and fight. The Russian army retreated deep into their endless territory, burning crops, villages, and bridges. So the French found nothing. This scorched earth tactic starved Napoleon's horses and men as they marched deeper into the brutal summer heat and dust. They finally fought at Borodino, a nightmare battle of artillery where 70,000 men died in a single day. Napoleon won the bloody field and entered Moscow triumphant, expecting the Russian Tsar to surrender and beg for peace. Instead, he found an empty, silent city. That very night, Russian patriots set Moscow on fire from every corner, with flames destroying their winter shelters, and the Tsar ignoring his messages. Napoleon was forced to order a retreat. That retreat through the Russian winter became the most horrific military disaster in the entire history of modern warfare. Temperatures dropped 30 degrees below zero as starving soldiers walked through knee-deep snow without proper winter coats or boots. Russian Cossacks on horseback attacked the freezing stragglers every single night, turning the march into a terrifying frozen hell. Men ate their own dying horses to survive, and thousands froze to death in their sleep on the snow. Out of 600,000 soldiers who entered Russia, fewer than 90,000 stumbled back out alive that winter. The myth of his invincibility was shattered forever. Europe smelled blood in the water and united to destroy him. Russia, Prussia, Austria, Britain and Sweden formed a massive new coalition to crush the weakened French emperor once and for all. Even with a brand new army of teenage recruits, Napoleon still won brilliant tactical victories against overwhelming enemy numbers. But at the Battle of Leipzig, known as the Battle of the Nations, his enemies finally overwhelmed his forces. Surrounded and betrayed by former allies, Napoleon was pushed all the way back to the very gates of Paris. His own generals walked into his room and refused to fight anymore, telling him the empire was officially finished. In April 1814, the man who once ruled Europe was forced to sign his unconditional abdication of power. His enemies banished him to Elba, a tiny Mediterranean island, making him ruler of a rocky prison with guards. Most people thought the story of Napoleon Bonaparte was over forever, but they underestimated his relentless, unbreakable ambition. After 10 months on Elba, he watched France suffer under the restored monarchy and planned a daring, impossible escape. With just 1,000 loyal soldiers, he slipped past British guardships and landed on the southern coast of France. The French king sent a regiment of soldiers to arrest him, blocking his path on a quiet mountain road. In one of history's most legendary moments, Napoleon walked alone toward the enemy guns and opened his coat wide. He shouted to them, "If there is any soldier among you who wants to kill his emperor, here I am." Silence hung in the air for a second, before the soldiers lowered their weapons and screamed, "Long live the emperor!" Every army sent to capture him defected to his side instead, joining his march all the way to Paris. The French king fled the country in terror without firing a shot, and Napoleon reclaimed his empire in 20 days. This miraculous comeback kicked off the famous 100 Days, but Europe immediately declared war on Napoleon himself as an outlaw. He knew he had to strike first, so he marched north into Belgium to fight the British and Prussians. In June 1815, he faced the Duke of Wellington at the muddy, rain-soaked fields of Waterloo. Heavy rain the night before delayed his cannon fire, giving the Prussian army crucial hours to march to Wellington's aid. French cavalry charged the British squares repeatedly, but Wellington held his defensive line with cold, stubborn determination all afternoon. Just as the British line was about to break, 60,000 Prussian soldiers arrived on the flank and attacked. Napoleon sent in his invincible old guard for a final desperate charge, but even his ultimate veterans were repelled. When the old guard broke and ran, panic swept the French army, sealing Napoleon's final devastating defeat at Waterloo. This time, the British took no chances. They exiled him to St. Helena, a lonely rock in the South Atlantic. Guarded by warships and high cliffs, escape was mathematically impossible from this damp, windswept prison thousands of miles away. For 6 bitter years, the man who once controlled a continent lived in a drafty house infested with rats. He spent his final days dictating his memoirs, ensuring that history would remember his victories, laws, and military genius. In May 1821, at just 51 years old, Napoleon Bonaparte died in exile, whispering about France and the army. Some historians suspect he was poisoned with arsenic, while others believe stomach cancer finally defeated the great Corsican conqueror. 20 years after his death, France brought his body home and entombed him with immense honor in central Paris. So, what made this short, bullied island boy the most analyzed and unforgettable ruler in all of human history? He fought in 60 major battles during his life and lost only 7, outsmarting generals who studied war for decades. He transformed warfare forever by using rapid troop movement, artillery concentration, and psychology to shatter enemy morale before fighting. Beyond the battlefield, his Napoleonic Code remains the foundation of civil law for dozens of nations across the globe today. He proved that a single individual with relentless focus and speed could demolish centuries of feudal tradition in a heartbeat. Yet his story is also a chilling warning about how unchecked ambition and pride can destroy everything you build. He rose from nothing to conquer Europe, only to lose his throne twice and die on a lonely, desolate island. Whether you see him as an enlightened hero or a ruthless tyrant, his name still echoes louder than thunder today. That is the immortal, unbelievable saga of Napoleon Bonaparte, the outsider who bent the entire world to his will.